Bueno, para seguir con nuestro programa, en el próximo espacio nos vamos a colocar el chip financiero y vamos a entender esa importancia que tiene invertir en salud de la mujer. Y para eso le doy la bienvenida a Lucía.
Lucía,
Permiso,
bienvenida.
muy bien, muchas gracias chicos.
Iniciamos con los paneles, ¿sí?
Excelente,
¿Qué te pareció?
vamos a arrancar muy bien sus presentaciones, pero tengo que hablar de algo muy importante que son las inversiones, ¿no? No necesitamos inversiones para que todas estas propuestas para este gap que estaban planteando en nuestros keynotes se disuelvan. Entonces vamos a empezar con este panel que es muy interesante. Les pido que se coloquen sus auriculares porque va a ser en inglés. Así que voy a empezar en inglés. Vamos a hacer el switch todos, se ponen los auriculares, quien lo necesita, porque vamos a dar el Welcome to the panel Women's Health and Strategic Investment, Not a Cost. In this panel, we will explore how different actors view women's health financing in Latin America and is seen in a strategic investment or a cost. Vamos a ver si es un costo o es una inversión. We will discuss how to communicate the return of investment in women's health to decision makers and the social and economic impact of not prioritizing it. Vamos a darle la bienvenida ahora sí a los panelistas para empezar. Welcome Mauricio Santamaría. He's a Colombian. Fuerte el aplauso para que venga como con ganas. He's a Colombian public policy expert specializing in social welfare, labor and infrastructure. He has been Colombian Minister of Social Protection and Planning. And Santa Maria, welcome, bienvenido, has led fiscal health and pension reforms and has worked with the World Bank. With a PhD in economics from Georgetown, he has influenced key policies for Colombia and negotiated the free trade agreement with the US. He is currently a senior partner on the consulting firm eConcepto. Impressive, felicitaciones. Seguimos porque nuestro próximo invitado también en inglés es David Wegner. Welcome David, fuerte el aplauso también. David is market president de Florida Blue, South America, where he leads business operations in 8 countries from the Keys to the Treasure Coast. He has over 30 years of experience in healthcare industry, and David will be speaking in English, so please keep your extensive experience and your headphones on. Ahora vamos a darle la bienvenida a nuestra próxima invitada, Alejandra Botero. Welcome, Alejandra. Ella es Manager of Planning and Development Impact CFA, Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. Alejandra is an economist and political scientist with extensive experience in multilateral banking, innovation and entrepreneurship. Y ahora, último, pero no por eso menos importante, vamos a darle la bienvenida a Fernando Ruiz. Welcome, Fernando. Fuerte el aplauso. Director of Health Policy for Roche Pharma in Latin America. Dr. Ruiz is a medical doctor with a master's degree in public health and economics and PhD in public health. He was Colombian Minister on Health from 2020 to 22 and also Vice Minister of Public Health and Scientific Leader of the Centro Integral. Felicitaciones, la verdad, un gran panel que vamos a empezar primero con David. David, welcome.
Thank you.
To this impressive panel. We're going to start with you. And it's well known that access to health is not conditioned by the lack or non-provision of services. There are multiple social determinants such as access to education, employment, housing, postcode that impact whether the woman can access quality health care in timely manner. So what are the main challenges you face in terms of the social determination of health to improve clinical outcome for injured women in Florida Blue especially, and what strategies have you implemented to address these challenges?
So that's an excellent question, and thank you, and I'm going to get to that. But what I noticed is everybody up here is from Colombia, and I love it. And I want you guys to know, yo soy colombiano también, pero hablo como un gringo, okay? So I'm going to speak I'm going to speak in English. My mom's in Barranquilla. So anyway, we got a full Colombian team here. So, and you know, and I want to answer your question, but I got here early and I watched the earlier presentations. And I saw the disparities in men versus women. Mm-hmm. And you know, it bothered me a little bit because it's got to be up in front in your face because it's not something we look at a lot unless we're a scientist and doing research. And you know, coming from a single mom and raised with 2 sisters, 2 Colombian sisters, my mom, my grandmother very involved, watching me when I'm little, she didn't speak English in the United States. I was born here, so that's where I learned my Spanish. And seeing the difference, what I noticed is now married and raising a daughter as well, is that women are always caring for others, and sometimes they put themselves last. And I think we have to start with that. And I thought I understood women. Sisters, my mom, dating women here in South Florida, getting married. But I really didn't understand women until I had a daughter and I saw one raised. And I saw the challenges that she's been through. She's up at the University of Alabama now in nursing. And I think I understand maybe about 95%. I still have a little bit more to learn about women, okay? I'm never gonna be there. But having a daughter was a big help. So let me share with you, I'm with Florida Blue, and we sell managed care and we sell insurance, and mostly in Florida, but across the United States through GuideWell. And we are serving over 7 million residents in Florida. And what's really nice is we don't sell stock in our company, and we reinvest in our community. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about. So I am the market president for Okeechobee, or Palm Beach South to the Keys. And so we've got a little over 7 million people in my region. And so we are able to give back about $5 million a year to local communities. Oh. So where we start is we go down to the zip code level, and we look for zip codes that really need our help. Who's got access? What are the challenges? We start with, what is the percentage of children born in poverty? That's how we identify our zip code. That's where we start. Then we get to access. We go to how many families are single moms raising the family. So some of the things we do, it starts with money in the United States. Who can afford health care and afford good health care? So there's something called the federal poverty level. That's how they measure if you qualify for free health care, which is Medicaid. So if you're making less than $20,000 a year, and that number changes year over year, you qualify for Medicaid. If, say, for example, you go above the federal poverty level, then you may not qualify for Medicaid, so then you have to use Affordable Care, the ACA, the Affordable Care or Obamacare. And so what happens is Florida Blue goes out of its way to offer $0 ACA, the Affordable Care Act, in Miami, Palm Beach, Broward County, and in some counties north of here. So that means if a single mom, say she gets promoted, she's working at Target or Walmart, and they move her from a floor clerk to a supervisor, she is now making $30,000 or $35,000. With a single mom with 2 children, it's just hard to afford $500, $600, $700, $800 a month to pay to insure her children and herself. So that's where the ACA comes in, and that's what Florida Blue, that's part of our package. Some of the insurance we're selling, we make money on some insurance, some we don't. That's one where we don't, okay? But we're giving back. It's important that everybody's covered. So we talk about access. In Allapattah, in Miami, 33142 is the zip code. We're about to kick that off. When we did our research, 30% of the residents in Allapattah had a car and a driver's license. So how do the other 70% get to preventative care, okay? So we're working with FIU, the University of Miami, to get mobile clinics into the community, into the zip code. We're also working on getting transportation through a company similar to Uber called Lyft to go into the communities, pick them up, and get them to routine care. Mammograms, oncology, different types of preventative care, all types of tests. And so transport over to Fort Lauderdale. The zip code we picked there is 33311. For those of you that live here, it's right off of Sunrise and I-95, just east. It's where the big flea market is. It's an underserved community, very, very poor. Holy Cross Hospital was building an urgent care on Sistrunks. And the CEO there is Mark. I grew up with him. And I said, Mark, what are you going to do with this urgent care? He says, oh, we're going to give vaccinations. If people get the flu, they can come in. I go, listen, we need OBGYN in this neighborhood. The prevalence of premature births and C-sections is through the roof. And actually, who cares for the premature baby when it's born at 20 weeks, 22 weeks, when that young 15 or 16-year-old mother goes home? Who's there for the mother and for the baby? So we partner with local hospitals and local clinics in the area. We were able to fund on Tuesdays and Thursdays in several clinics for young mothers to go in and get that prenatal care, vitamins, ultrasounds, advice, and checkups. And so what we did and what we looked at over the last 18 months, we have decreased the amount of C-sections by 38%. We have taken babies and moms to full term by 50%. Now think about it. We're paying the claims. What happens when, and I've worked in healthcare, I've run hospitals as a CEO, but I was also a caregiver, and I used to work in the emergency room. And I'll tell you, in South Florida, it's very common for a 15 or 16-year-old girl to come in and delivering, and the parents are like, we didn't even know she was pregnant.
Wow.
We noticed she was wearing jackets. We noticed, and now they've got a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl with a 20-week-old baby. That baby goes into a NICU, a neonatal intensive care unit, and stays for 1 month, 2 months. That bill and the cost to the community is $3, $4, $5 million. Forget about the money. It's the right thing to do to help communities. But it's a win-win, and it teaches us that if we get ahead of diseases and opportunities and we get in front of it and we invest into the right communities, that we do it right. Now, this is my last point, and I'll let you get to your next, because I could talk for 2 hours on this, guys. I want to be respectful. I could talk for 3 hours, so they're going to shut my mic off. But I will tell you, for those of you that have grown up in Colombia, there's a company called Col Sanitas in Colombia. They came to Florida as Sanitas, and we partnered with them. We own half of Sanitas in Florida. We have well over 50 urgent cares and doctors, mostly Colombian across the state. And so their Sanitas here in Florida makes Saturdays Women's Day. So on Saturdays, women can go in and have a mammogram, can have a pap smear, can do different things, because we know the women are busy Monday through Friday. So Saturdays are Women's Days with Florida Blue and Sanitas. Guys, I have so many examples. I want to be respectful of the panel.
So interesting. Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
If you have, please, un aplauso para David. If you have any question, you have to use the wall. Please go to the panel 2, and you have to write your question for David or any people from the panel, and we're going to read when we finish this. But now we have to talk with Mauricio, regardless to Colombia. We have seen data presented by both Deloitte and McKinsey, and women's health is not prioritized in health investment, and this has economic repercussions in our countries, and not just on health. So how is health spending usually perceived within the Ministry of Finance, and it is more commonly seen as a short-term cost or as a long-term strategy investment? Because what factors also influence this perception?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am going to start by thanking the invitation. Fernando, thank you very much for having me here, and thanks to Roche for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here. So going to that question, I think that's the key question, not only for the health sector, but for, let's say, the entire
You can switch to Spanish. Puedes hablar en español if you want, ¿eh?
Yes?
Sí, porque hay traductor. Sí, puedes
¿Seguro?
switchar. Sí, donde esté más cómodo.
Bueno, entonces lo que quiero decir es que no solo es para el sector salud, dijéramos, ese problema que se menciona en la pregunta, que es muy importante, sino es para todos los sectores. Los recursos, hay algo que parece que no es muy claro en la, dijéramos, en la población en general, y es que los recursos siempre son finitos. Hay un punto máximo al que los gobiernos pueden llevar los impuestos, y los impuestos son la única fuente de ingreso que tienen los gobiernos. Los gobiernos no producen, pues dijéramos, los gobiernos en los países democráticos por lo general no producen bienes, no tienen negocios, a excepción de algunos pocos, y la fuente de ingresos son los impuestos, y los impuestos uno no los puede llevar a niveles prohibitivos. ¿Por qué digo eso? Porque eso hace que la competencia por recursos en el tema fiscal sea muy grande. Yo y Alejandra tuvimos la suerte y la no suerte también de tener que manejar la distribución de recursos en un país como Colombia, y la competencia es feroz. Es feroz, que los recursos para las carreteras, que los recursos para la educación, para la vivienda, para el agua potable, para la protección de la niñez, y la salud algunas veces queda, dijéramos, como relegada, porque cuando el sistema de salud funciona más o menos bien, como en Colombia, no se nota. Se empieza a notar es cuando funciona mal, y que hay crisis, dijéramos, de salud, que hacen que el gobierno necesite invertir más. Entonces, para contestar ahora sí, después de esta introducción larga, para contestar la pregunta de manera puntual, yo diría lo siguiente. Hay países que lo perciben como un costo y como un gasto, que tocó hacer el gasto en salud porque o si no la gente se me revela y sale a la calle si no tiene tratamiento. Pero hay países, y en eso es que me quiero concentrar, que han logrado verlo como una inversión que impacta el bienestar, y en el tema femenino pues ni hablar, y lo vimos en las presentaciones de esta mañana. Y ahí es donde me quiero concentrar un poquito en la respuesta, porque esto hace una gran diferencia, porque Colombia es uno de esos países que logró ver la inversión en salud, perdón la redundancia, como una inversión y no como un gasto. Cuando la gran reforma de la salud en Colombia empezó en 1993, Colombia gastaba 1,5% del PIB de Colombia en salud. Hoy en día gasta 8 puntos del PIB, un poco más de 8 puntos del PIB en salud, en tan solo 30 años. Eso no pasó en un siglo ni en 200 años, pasó en tan solo 30 años, pasar de 1,5 a 8 dentro de un PIB que se ha multiplicado por 6. ¿Sí? Entonces eso es un salto que pocos países pueden lograr. ¿Y por qué lo hicimos? Y yo diría, y ya con esto termino, hay 3 cosas que logró Colombia hacer, o 4 cosas que lo diferenciaron de los países que lo ven como un gasto. En primer lugar, dijéramos el hecho de que sea una asociación público-privada exitosa la prestación de los servicios de salud en Colombia. Eso ha hecho que la inversión se multiplique, no solo en infraestructura, porque la gente cuando habla de salud tiende a pensar en los hospitales y que aquí que allá, y la inversión en salud es muchísimo más que los hospitales. De hecho, los hospitales mal planificados terminan siendo una inversión que se vuelve un costo. Ahí sí no es inversión, sino es un costo. Entonces, dijéramos, la combinación del sector público y el privado en Colombia en la provisión, en el aseguramiento, con un sector público que regula fuertemente y que controla fuertemente, ha sido parte fundamental para que logremos ese salto. Lo segundo, que probablemente es lo más importante, es cómo se empoderó la comunidad en Colombia en el tema de salud. En Colombia, dijéramos, y eso se mezcla con el tercer tema, que es el tema judicial. En Colombia tenemos un derecho que se llama el derecho a la tutela, o pues es la tutela que protege los derechos fundamentales, y la gente se empoderó a través de la tutela para solicitar servicios de salud, que hay veces ha habido abuso de la tutela, y eso hay que reconocerlo, pero dijéramos en la parte positiva ha hecho que la comunidad exija unos servicios de salud, dijéramos que se presten a tiempo, que sean de buena calidad y que los medicamentos y los servicios estén presentes. Entonces el hecho que la comunidad lo exija, cosa que yo no veo en otros países, especialmente de Latinoamérica, ha hecho que los gobiernos en Colombia a partir del año 98, 99, pero especialmente a partir del 2006 se preocupen mucho por la inversión en salud y no dejen nunca que esta caiga. Y tercero, y ya con esto termino para no extenderme más, hay en Colombia hay un componente contributivo en el que las personas con cierto nivel de ingreso contribuyen de una manera importante al sector salud a través de un payroll tax, y hay otro componente subsidiado en el cual las personas no gastan un peso para nada. Un ejemplo fue la pandemia, que también manejó, cuando digo también, no es tan bien, sino tan bien manejó nuestro ministro de Salud, Fernando Ruiz. En Colombia nadie pagó un peso por vacunación, por la UCI, nadie pagó un peso, nadie, y la gente del régimen subsidiado hoy siente que tiene un derecho muy bien, dijéramos, que se satisface muy bien ese derecho y lo exige. Entonces el hecho de tener esas 3 cosas juntas, más otras a las que me referiré después, han hecho, y eso puede ser una solución a los países, para los países que no logran pasar de ver la salud como un gasto a una inversión. estos 3 temas creo que son fundamentales.
Gracias,
Muchas
Mauricio.
gracias.
Fuerte el aplauso, Mauricio. Muy bueno tu aporte. Vamos a volver al inglés, switch to English for Alejandra. Alejandra, led with what Mauricio was mentioned. What innovation mechanism for us in return from investment can we use to demonstrate that investing in women's health is not only improves health outcomes, but also the overall economic development of the country, right?
Thank you very much. And bueno, voy a hablar como en Spanglish. Un saludo acá a toda la audiencia. Sí, Spanglish. Bueno, I practiced it in English, so I'm going to try. I have to take advantage of that practice.
You have to do it.
And thank you very much, Fernando, for this invitation, and Roche Pharma. And of course, it's something that's very dear to my heart, being a woman, being Latin American, and working in development. So this is really a fantastic opportunity. For those who don't know, which I'm sure is a lot, I work at CAF, which is an investment bank for Latin America. So all the owners of CAF are Latin American countries. We have 21 Latin American countries, and we operate strictly in the region. We have a $35 billion portfolio, of which 90% is sovereign, o sea, we work with the governments, and 10% is private. And that's, I think, interesting because it shows you a little bit like what the composition and all the areas of development we work in. And when we talk about, I was thinking about the question when you sent it of what innovative financial ways to showcase the importance of investing in women's health. And I don't think it's that much about the instruments, it's about revealing the hidden knowledge that what we're missing out when we don't invest in women's health. And I think that's what was seen in the keynote speakers in both cases. We usually take like a very poverty-oriented approach when we talk about development. So when we do the economic analysis, we don't really talk about the economic benefits. It's what the multidimensional poverty is going to reduce if we have more access to health or a greater quality of health. But we don't really talk about that huge loss in productivity that we're doing by not attending all the sicknesses, for example, that women get differentially affected for. So I think that when we talk about cost-benefit analysis, and when we choose where we're going to invest or what projects we're going to do, as I was saying, since 90% is with governments, we can't really say no to Ecuador or Colombia when someone comes and asks for a project. But we can work with them to tailor the project and to have agency and how to better improve it. And I think that's an innovative place where development banks have to work in, is to see how you work with the ministries of health to not just focus on maternal care, on infant mortality, but have that whole perspective on productivity. And the other sort of instrument that I think is very interesting that we have to both look when we look at the public sector projects and private sector projects is the social or the health return on economic investment, the ROIC. So not only look at the return on investment as it is plain, but also see how we monetize, how we quantify that qualitative importance of investing in these types of projects. So what is the qualitative benefit or the economic analysis benefit of investing in preventative care, of investing in integral approach to women's health? There's a Lancet article from 2022 that says that there's a 7-to-1 return on investment when you look at an integral approach in low-income countries, and that goes up to 11-to-1% when you talk about middle and income and lower income countries. So I think that basically to come down is to really look at traditional approaches, look at the relationship with the government and also in the relationship with the private sector, but with that agency approach of what are we missing out, and from the economic benefit in productivity of looking at the hidden costs that we don't see at the moment when we're looking at traditional approaches. And finally, just sort of to close, and I'll expand on that later, this is something, a responsibility of development banks that we have to incorporate it into all our financial instruments. So in obviously traditional sort of public sector operations, but blended finance instruments, have thematic bonds. Why not think about, there's lots of innovations in the green space sector. So debt for nature swaps, you could think about debt for nature, for gender and health swaps. So I do think there's a very interesting space in terms of innovation of instruments, but again, going back to revealing these hidden costs and look at it as an investment and not as a cost.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Fuerte el aplauso. No se olviden, por favor, don't forget to send your questions to the wall because we're going to review in few minutes. But now I need to ask you, Fernando, I'm so excited to have your perspective in this situation because you, throughout your career, you have had multiple hats. You've been researcher, academic, health minister, multilateral, and now in the private sector. So based on your experience and the whole academia, the civil service and now the private sector, how do you think collaborate between these different sectors and how they can be improved to change the perception of health investment from an expense to a strategic investment, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the possibility to have this very, very, very interesting panel with a lot of people that I appreciate a lot and have a lot of respect for their work, and to have the possibility to be here with this very, very good group of people that are working in the area of health, communicating and giving the right message for our people in Latin America especially. I will start saying that when I applied to my medical school in Colombia some years ago, a lot of years ago, but not too many, there was a barrier to the access of women, of girls to the school of medicine. In my school and in most of the schools in Colombia, there was just 30% of the application for women were accepted and 70% for men. This was incredible. If we see this in the retrospective view, this today it's impossible to accept, but this happened. And if you see this in the passing for several years, of course, the way that the medicine and the health services in our countries evolve in a way thinking mainly in the health of men. And we are just starting to change this. And there are a lot of issues that we have to address to really correct the situation that we have in our countries. 2 days ago, it was published a story by the Clark, the Economic Commission for the Latin America, and PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, and has some data that is still very important. Very important. In the poorest quintile of the women in 9 countries of Latin America, 59% of women think that distance is a huge barrier to access to the health services. To be alone and to have to go alone to the health services is irrelevant for 40% of the women. And this is very striking. Not having money to pay for the services is a barrier to access to services to 74% of women in these 9 countries. So this gives us the idea of how are the difficulties and how difficult is the gap that we have in Latin America for the access for women to services. So we have an educational issue, we have a social determinants, some social determinants that are very important and have a differentiate against women. And if we see services, we can find that in some services we have a lot of bias against the health of the women. In most Latin American countries, we have a shortage of specialists, of medical specialists. But if you see how is this bias distributed between specialists, you will find some differences that are very, very important. The rheumatic diseases are very, 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 very prevalent in women. More than 70% of the rheumatic diseases affect women mainly. We have a huge shortage of rheumatologists in almost all Latin American countries. If we see issues like fibromyalgia, the protocols and the approach to work in fibromyalgia in our countries does not exist. There are no guides, there are no way to work on that. And if we see early diagnosis for cancer diseases like breast cancer, cervical cancer, we have a huge gaps in the possibility to access to these diagnostic diseases. So I think we have to address these issues, and especially to point out these issues in the media, to let the society know that these gaps exist and we have to work on that. But there is hope. Not everything is about message. We had a hope. You know that in several Latin American countries today, more than 55% or 52 or to 55% of the physicians that got out from the universities are now women.
Wow.
In
Muy bien.
in a country like Colombia or in a country like Brazil or Chile, more than 51% of the new physicians are women. We had to assure that these women have the possibility to go to a specialist training program, and to assure that these women could treat women in a way that women want to be treated. And of course, the men that are exerting the medicine could do a good job, of course. And we need to assure from the ministries of health and from every public and private organization that women issues and women working in the organizations had the possibility and the power to point out and to develop projects for women health, because we see some gaps on this issue, and in some countries we need to improve on that. So this is my view.
Thank you, Fernando. Amazing point of view.
If I could
Yes.
add, I wanted to share, that's a very important point where we're getting more women as physicians and leaders and doing it. I personally look for women when I go to a new doctor, or my dentist, Martha de Iglesias, when she works on my mouth, my dentist, she looks like she's doing a Picasso. I watch her eyes. And to me, I see a noticeable difference. When I go to a female physician versus a male. Male wants to get from A to B to C to D and answer my question. And listen, if there's male doctors out there, don't take it the wrong way. But for me personally, if I can see a woman physician, that's where I go.
I want you to excuse my what I'm going to say, but I had 1 month ago to go to the urologist, and when it was open the door, that was a woman. I had this feeling that oh my God,
You were
that
shocked.
was such an incredible experience. I was a very young woman, and so I say, oh my God, what is it?
Yes, women are pretty too.
And
smart.
I have a thinking, and I remember my wife Liz, who is a wonderful woman, and I think she has been exposed to this process for years.
Yes.
Why I not?
Yeah. Woo! So good. So good, Fernando. Thank you for the addition. We're going to come back a little bit with Mauricio. In Spanish or in English, Mauricio? You can do it?
Whatever.
English, come on. We keep
All right.
doing English. We know the obsession of economists to measure and manage everything. So what performance indicators of KPIs would you recommend that the health 10% to the finance minister to encourage greater allocation or resources to women's health. Do you have any tip to give to the audience here?
Yes, I have some tips.
Okay, let's take a note.
So let's start by saying that there is kind of a misconception from health ministers that you have to go to the finance minister or the economics minister and tell him about, health is going to increase economic growth by 2 points. So if you don't invest in health, you are not going to grow as much as you thought before. And that's really a misconception because, finance and economic or planning ministers, they already have in their mind how much the economy is going to grow and so on, and they don't believe those kinds of indicators, among other things, because all the ministers of the sectoral ministers tell them the same thing. If you build roads, you are going to have 5 extra percentage points. If you go to education, you will have 2.5 points. So you end up adding up like a 20% growth of the economy, which is impossible. So what you really need is, let's say, 2 or 3 kinds of indicators, and at the end I will speak about a little bit about one special indicator about women's health. But first of all, you need to tell the finance or the planning minister or the economics minister, as the health sector, I am going to improve my spending by making it more efficient. What does it mean? I'm going to reduce costs here. I am only going to invest in infrastructures. That means hospitals where they are needed. I'm going to build good networks of services, and I'm going to reduce, let's say, spending by efficiency, but I need you to give me more money to be able to pay for the real things or the important things that I need, like women's health or like preventive care.
Of course.
That's a key issue, and when I was Minister of Health, I had that with the reduction of prices of medications that we implemented in 2010 in Colombia, and that was a huge success at the beginning. I don't know if Rolf is around here. I had to go in a little fight with him back then in 2010, but that was a huge success because at the end, it ended up giving more resources to the sector. The second, it was already mentioned by my co-panelist here, poverty indicators. Those are key, especially multidimensional poverty. Health is probably the most important indicator besides employment that impacts the multidimensional poverty indicators. And presidents and ministers, especially presidents, care a lot about poverty indicators. And when you go to a president and you say, look, if we have these poverty indicators falling or increasing from 25 to 35 because health insurance is not or coverage is not at 100%, presidents become nervous, and they will tell the finance minister, give them more money to finance coverage. That's a key issue. And finally, regarding women's health, it has been already mentioned here, but the gaps between women and men are not known, they are not known, and they exist, and they are true, and they are a real thing. So we have to expose them. Probably the press can do a good job there and help the government. But when you go, for example, to the multi-dimensional poverty indicator, you have there some distinctions between men and women, and you see that the lag in terms of some health outcomes related to women health, they are very large, especially in preventive care and in chronic diseases like Alzheimer treatment. Those are key issues, especially now that the population is becoming every minute we live longer and longer and longer. So that's a key issue. And I just want to finish by saying that women's health, I think, is the key step now to reach a good health outcome in many countries. There are some countries that know that, but there are some countries that don't. And you see the differences immediately, for example, in the indicators that Fernando was talking about. So we have to make those visible, and that will help to bring more resources to cover women's need as the important issue that they are right now.
Thank you, Mauricio. Fuerte el aplauso. No se olviden, por favor, de dejar sus preguntas. Write your question on the wall. You have to go to the app. I don't know if you already checked it because I don't see so many questions. So please, write the question. We have ministers. We have Florida Blue, Alejandra. We have the opportunity to ask themselves.
I'll make a comment while we're looking.
No, but I want to show how you have to go. Panel 2 and write the question, please.
So while we're waiting for questions to come in, you know that women are much stronger than men. And I have a scientific proof for it. If you, and you can Google this on your phone, if you have a male baby born premature and a female baby born premature, the lungs develop in gestation at week 32. The lungs are fully developed in gestation. If they're born before week 32, the survival rates are much higher for the female than it is for the male. So, and I've worked in level 3 NICUs as a caregiver. So you'll see the male babies come out at 24, 25 weeks. They won't work as hard to breathe as the female.
Wow.
That's a true, you can Google that. But women come out stronger. It's why we rely on you guys so much. And sometimes, and you can't ignore yourselves, okay? So take care of yourselves.
Thank you, David. Así que se escuchan a David. Escriban, por favor, colaboren, pongan su granito de arena. Pero vamos a seguir hablando de finanzas, tenemos que buscar investment. Por eso, Alejandra, I need to ask you, how can development banks such as CFF play a more proactive role in improving this investment and that the country is making women's health, and what commitments could they make? You have an answer for that?
I have lots of answers.
Oh, wow. That's good.
No, mentira, but we still have to prove them. No, this has been really interesting because actually having the perspective from insurance companies, of course, from Mauricio and from Fernando in looking, because development banks are the allies of the governments to be able to do that. You know, they talk, obviously they talk with the finance industry because we're talking about money, but we also have that whole aspect on development. And as Mauricio was saying, having a perspective on what the impact this is going to have on multidimensional poverty or poverty in general, but also in terms of productivity. When we talk about women and the hidden cost, I think is important. And you know, the fact that if you have knowledge, so most development banks have a big group of economists. They have some money annually that they spend on technical cooperation, and all that goes, you know, hand in hand with the projects and with the governments that we work in to be able to visibilize this knowledge. So I would say there's like 5 things. One is raising awareness about this issue. So please consider us an ally in all this information, because I feel that what we most know is that we don't know the huge impact that we say. We don't know. I was learning today about how, you know, you have a 50% chance of being misdiagnosed of a heart attack if you're a woman, or the fact that in Latin America it's even higher than in the global percentage of the fact that the disabilities or the lower ability to work is during the times of the workforce. I think it was like 86% versus 80%. This is something that I think we have a responsibility as banks to raise awareness and to make sure that this is that our banks, that our countries know about. Also, I think it's really key to work with them, for example, on gender-specific data collections. You know, if you only have 5% of all data collections that are of women, you know, you're not going to be able to see those specific differences that Fernando was talking about. Of course, institutional strengthening, working with policy, working with regulatory barriers. So those are like the typical things that a development bank can do. But I think the other thing, I think we have a responsibility to have a gender perspective, like a gender mainstreaming in all our operations. Of course, in the social ones, but even if when you talk about water sanitation projects, when you talk about road access, as you were saying, there's so many things that indirectly affect the lack of access care for women that I think it's a responsibility for development banks to look at that transversal approach. Our objective as a bank is to have at least one of the two operations, 1 out of 2, o sea, 50% of the operations, to have at least one gender inclusion and diversity component in the operation by next year. Right now we're at 40%. The other thing that I think is key is tailoring operations and instruments to the sector. So I was talking about results-based financing, concessional financing. Basically, what that does is that you pick different funding, how do you call it? Now I'm doing on the Spanish. Fuentes, financing funds.
Fuentes de inversión,
right?
de financiamiento.
Sources, and you mix them together to make them instrumentable and to make opportunities bankable and interesting. And that's what development banks are here to do. So if you have a European bank, for example, the German investment bank, which is called KfW, having a line of credit for women's health, and you can join it with funds from an NGO and funds from a development bank, then you can have a very interesting interest rate, or you can have a bigger grace period, and you can tailor these financing mechanisms to help both to make bankable, not only public projects, but also private projects. And that goes hand in hand with, I think, another responsibility, which is mobilizing resources from other instruments. So Latin America has a huge gap in reaching the SDGs. We know we have a huge gap, definitely, in investing in women's health. And what we need to is bring sources globally of it that are interested in helping bridge this gap, and then packaging and tailoring mechanisms and instruments to be able to do it. And then finally, I think, especially when we talk about the private sector and all the opportunities we have, is helping de-risk many of these operations and many of these opportunities that we have, not only in terms of obviously prototypes and new projects, but also with funds that are trying to enter this market. Please hold us into consideration as a development bank so that we can be your ally. So lots of opportunities.
So interesting, Salud. Fuerte el aplauso también para Alejandra. Hay muchas oportunidades de los bancos para financiar, y ahora quiero justamente la visión de Fernando. Fernando Feynman, después quiero las preguntas de ustedes, así que por favor, espero que estén mandando porque todavía no vi ninguna. Fernando, from your current position in pharmaceutical industry, what is your company values proposition for collaborating with the public, private and civil society sectors to improve women's health and implement more effective and sustainability strategies long term?
I have the fortune to work at Roche, and Roche have a very long history of research for women. If we see, I have not found this measure, but we see the investment and the contribution of Roche in issues like, for example, breast cancer treatment. I could feel very proud to be here, seated, and this is, of course, a special platform to work about this. But I got some data from a rant story that I read in these days, that it says that if the research in the United States close the gap between researching in male-centered issues and female interest in 12%, the savings will be for 1 year $12 billion in 3 diseases: in Alzheimer's disease, in coronary disease, and in rheumatoid arthritis. This is just for these 3 diseases. So I think we have a huge work to do for the future. Research has to set this issue of the bias, and of course the contribution from the pharmaceutical industry, not just Roche, from the pharmaceutical industry, and the contribution for the research centers is of course very important. But I will add another issue that is hearing what Alejandra said. We need to close the gap and maybe to start working with the multilateral agencies to do and to produce and to have specific process to close this gap and maybe to develop public research areas that work for our countries, because the issue is both in the research area, in the development of new medicines, of course, but the other issue is how to assure that these medicines could be available for the people in a neighborhood of Lima, or in a neighborhood of Sao Paulo, or in a poor neighborhood in Bogota, or a poor neighborhood in Mexico City. I think we need to work together to help the governments to close these gaps and to develop better innovations to produce really a change in women's health.
Bueno, fuerte el aplauso. Muchas gracias, Fernando. Bueno, hay varios ahí comentarios y preguntas en el muro, gracias a quienes comentaron. Mauricio, están hablando específicamente también para vos, para Alejandra. Alejandra Sebastián Palacios, que está por aquí, pregunta qué pasos se deberían dar desde tu opinión para que los organismos multilaterales cuenten con programas de financiamiento enfocados en salud y acceso a tratamientos de innovación para países latinoamericanos. Sí, tú. Ese fue específico para vos, Alejandra, sí.
¿Y ya puedo contestar en español?
Sí, podés.
Bien, perfecto. No, pues yo creo que, digamos, tradicionalmente si uno le pregunta a cualquier banco de desarrollo si tiene programas de salud y nutrición, tienen programas de salud y nutrición y lo han hecho, digamos, porque es parte pues fundamental como una de las aristas de desarrollo y de pobreza. Desde mi perspectiva lo que pasa es que está solamente centrado en unos temas muy precisos, que como vimos desde la presentación de McKinsey solo afectan el 5% de la disabilidad de las mujeres, que son los temas materno-reproductivos cuando hablamos de las mujeres. Entonces yo creo que ahí el rol de los bancos de desarrollo, de las ONGs, del sector privado, es visibilizar la oportunidad tan mucho más amplia que hay de trabajar en otros aspectos, en todo el otro 46% de enfermedades que si uno lo mira desde una perspectiva de género son diferenciadas y tienen una importancia muy clave en la productividad y pues obviamente por supuesto en la calidad de vida de las mujeres, que es donde creo que nos tenemos que enfocar en esta próxima horizonte. Y yo creo que aún CAF, digamos, y saldré de acá de una vez ya con las reuniones con el equipo de salud y nutrición, de que tengamos esta perspectiva muchísimo más amplia para poder generar el conocimiento y esa visibilidad interna nosotros y trabajar de la mano con cada uno de los países accionistas y de los otros actores para que efectivamente esto sea algo que no sea un hidden cost, no sea algo oculto, sino que algo que todos estemos interesados en invertir.
Muy bueno. Muchas gracias, Alejandra. Recuerden que desde el mediodía van a poder entrevistar a todos nuestros panelistas, van a poder encontrarlos y hacer, porque quedaron muchas preguntas afuera, nos estamos quedando casi sin tiempo. Queda un minuto. Patri, ¿no me dejas meter una pregunta? Una. Ay, porque hay un montón y están muy interesantes. Mauricio, mira, muchas preguntas para ti en español. Dicen que específicamente comentaste el caso de Colombia y sus medidas para ver la atención. ¿Para qué están llegando más preguntas? Chicos, paren un minuto ahora. No, me explota el wall. Acá. Y sus medidas para ver la atención como una inversión y no un gasto. Entonces, ¿has tenido posibilidad de contrastar tus metodologías con el resto de países del continente, como por ejemplo Uruguay, donde el sistema sanitario público y privado trabajan de la mano gracias al sistema del Fondo Nacional de Salud? Y una más, porque hay muchas preguntas, si compartes algún dato o estrategia para convencer a las masas de que las APPS funcionan no solo para construir carreteras.
Sí, ¿en español o inglés?
En español, porque esta pregunta es en español.
Es muy importante la pregunta y la respuesta a la primera parte es que sí. Yo he revisado, dijéramos, bastantes casos, no solo en Latinoamérica, sino en algunos otros países. Y la diferencia, dijéramos, es grande cuando uno mira, por ejemplo, países como Perú y Ecuador comparado con Colombia. En Uruguay, que es el caso que la persona que hace la pregunta menciona, ha habido también un importante incremento que también, como en el caso de Colombia, no solo es jalonado por el hecho de estar los públicos y los privados, sino por el hecho de que la demanda de servicios de salud se ha incrementado mucho. Entonces, cuando la demanda se incrementa, en Colombia el incremento de la demanda de los servicios de salud, sobre todo por parte de las mujeres, entre el año 2006, 2007 hasta el año 2022, llegó a tener años de 9-10% de la frecuencia de uso por persona. Wow. Es decir, no en la demanda total que crece porque la población crece, etcétera, sino en la frecuencia de uso por persona. En Colombia, pues hay en este momento se dan aproximadamente 1.100 millones, o sea, 1.1 billones de prestaciones de salud al año.
Wow.
1.100 millones de interacciones entre el sistema de salud y los ciudadanos. Entonces, eso hace pues que el gasto aumente. Pero dijéramos, las diferencias sí son muy grandes entre ciertos países y otros, en parte por también lo que han mencionado acá, en parte lo que lo mencionó Alejandra también, porque falta información para saber dónde están los gaps y qué se puede hacer. Y la segunda parte de la pregunta era sí tengo datos que muestran que las asociaciones público-privadas funcionan no solo en carreteras, porque todo el mundo cuando piensa en APPs piensa en infraestructura, no solo de carreteras, sino en hidroeléctricas, incluso hospitales, pero en temas de prestación de servicios funcionan, como es el ejemplo de Colombia, como es el ejemplo de Uruguay, como es el ejemplo de Israel, como es el ejemplo de Holanda. En prestación de servicios de salud funcionan muy bien y uno lo ve en los health outcomes que tienen esos países y que yo puedo compartir pues obviamente con las personas
Para
acá.
eso te pueden encontrar ahora al mediodía para la entrevista.
Exacto.
¿Está bien? Bueno, le damos un fuerte aplauso a este panel. Thank you so much, each of the panelists.